Season 9 of Night School is presented by the AQHA. Catch the Bank of America Championship Challenge Finals this Saturday at Sam Houston. Keeneland Select. New players can earn a $150 sign-up bonus. Woodbine. Live racing continues at Woodbine and Woodbine Mohawk Park. Queen's Plate Day, Saturday, June 29th. Remington Park. Live quarter horse racing all weekend with the Grade 2 AQHA Challenge Championship on Sunday, May 12th, and Express Bet, home of the $25,000 Preakness Big Bet Sweepstakes.
Horses have off days, and by looking at them before they actually get on the racetrack, you get an initial impression of which way they're leaning.
This is going to sound crazy, but for me, it's intellectual stimulation.
Class is now in session. It's time for Night School. Here are your hosts.
Welcome, everyone, to the 2019 Night School season. It's Season 9 of the National Online Fan Education Program. Tonight, we're going back to the basics. Win, place, and show wagering. Effective uses, when and when not, to play racing's most time-honored wagers. I'm Jeremy Plonk from Horseplayer Now, joined as always in Night School by Brian W. Spencer, General Manager of HP Now. Brian, win, place, and show wagering goes back to the beginning of the time, and tonight we're going to give due time to it.
Yeah, I think, win, play, show wagering, it's a little bit interesting to sort of watch the evolution. As, decades ago, it was one of the only games in town, maybe along with the Quinella in those days, or the Daily Double on the last two or first two races of the day. But, now I feel like with the proliferation of so many exotic wagers and good wagering minimums and just so many options, I almost feel like the paradigm shifts a little bit. Win, play, show is almost the sort of supplement to some of the more focused wagering strategies that we make, where we're really trying to maximize our reward, in those exotic wagers, really trying to get a bigger score. But you can really leverage win, place, and sometimes show wagers to your advantage, especially as a little bit of a jumping off point and a potential backup for some of your other gimmick wagers.
The win wager itself is still one of the most popular in the game. The place and show, its usefulness, we'll talk about in this episode, varies on your skill level, I think, and your level of experience. But the win wager can still be a very effective tool in your box for betting on horse racing. And it's, the simplest and most easy thing to understand and grasp. My horse is faster than your horse. And the win wager kind of does hearken to your ego as a horse player in being able to pick a winner. There is something about it, almost esoteric to just the gambling experience. I mean, there are times we cash a pick three, and you had three horses by four horses, and maybe you didn't feel like you unraveled Rubik's Cube. But with a win wager, there is still something special about knowing I identified the right horse in the race, and it is a feel-good measure for the soul when it comes to betting on the horse.
And as in some of the other wagers we talk about too, we talk about those pick threes, pick fours. There's only so much you can know. You can kind of guesstimate what maybe your return is going to be if you hit that wager. And with the exception of some late odds changes of a half point here or there, generally speaking, the win pool, what you're going to get, and that allows you to hunt around for exactly the right kind of price rather than some of those more complicated, trifectas, superfectas, those deeper wagers where you get an idea of what return you're looking for, but you can't really pinpoint it right. And I think that that's one of the big things, Jeremy, that you and I have always kind of agreed on, that win betting is a great way to be able to really know, when you figure out what is the risk versus reward sort of line that I'm taking on this horse. It's as simple as, what's the number on the tote board? Is it better or worse than what I say it needs to be to demand a bet?
And when you say better or worse in the nomenclature of gambling on the horse races, that means overlay or underlay. If a horse is an overlay, it's a price better than you think it should be. You'll get more money back than you think the risk is involved in terms of the horse's chance of winning. If it's an underlay, the horse is being bet harder than you think it should be. The return would be shorter than what you're expecting. Determining overlays and underlays in the win pool, to me, is the entire ball game. You select the horse that you want, fine. I mean, that's part of the handicapping process. But when it comes to betting to win, it is really price sensitive. And does this horse offer a fair price to you? You get to look at those odds on the tote board. They cycle every 60, 90 seconds. But that last click of the odds, we know about 80% of the wagering in America happens in the last one or two clicks of the tote board. So there can be some big odd shifts. If you're playing to win, I don't recommend that you bet it 10, 15 minutes to post time. If you're on track and it's a busy day, of course you have to get in line and do that. But if you can wait later, play on your ADW, on your account if you're on track and they allow mobile wagering on track, I think you have an advantage by waiting to the last possible second that you can to see what price you're going to get locked in on. What price that you play in the win pool, though, is determined by what we call a fair odds line. There's a morning line odds, which the track handicapper projects as what he thinks the public will do, a prediction of what the betting might look like. That really is kind of a fictional thing that changes once the odds start moving on the tote board. But in a fair odds line, Brian, tell the fans what we're talking about there.
Basically, a fair odds line is before the race is open for betting. When you're doing your handicapping, you've kind of got it all figured out. You go through the field and you assign them essentially a price that indicates their realistic chances of winning that race. So, if a horse needs to be 3-1 in order to represent their actual percentage chance of winning the race, then if you're looking at the tote board and the horse is 9-5, he's getting overbet. The other players are overvaluing that horse, and so then that makes that horse, as you mentioned, an underlay. Now, to make a fair odds line, you basically, the formula comes out essentially the same as making a morning line, but what you want to do is you want to get all of those prices of the horses in the field to essentially add up to 100% plus the track's win takeout. So that way your line is going to be working on the same percentages as the racetrack's line, and you're going to be looking at the tote board, and then basically from that point, if you get good, and it takes some time, but if you get good at really creating a fair odds line, it almost can become as simple as just looking at the tote board and finding out where the bigger numbers are, where those so-called overlays are.
If you go to the horseplayernow.com night school page, we've got a newbie sheet, if you will, that kind of gives you some of the basics of wagering. But within that, we give you the point system that you need in order to make a morning line or a fair odds line. So if you need to know that 2-1 is 33%, or 3-1 is 25%, 4-1, 20%, all those different totals are listed on that newbie handicapping handout that you can download. Again, horseplayernow.com, the night school page. Download that beginner's guide, and it'll help you set those kind of lines for yourself. So you want, like Brian said, you want your points to add up to somewhere around the takeout, which is roughly 18% at a lot of tracks, maybe 19%, down to as low as 16 at some tracks. So it'll be 100 plus that number. So your total percentage has to come out to about 116, 118, 119, depending on your track, to get a good, solid, fair odds line. If you have that, then you'll be able to compare apples to apples on the tote board. If you think this horse has a reasonable chance to win at 25%, that would be 3-1. And you look up on the tote board and the horse is 5-1. That, my friends, is an overlay. That 5-1 is higher than you think they should be. Wait as long as you can for those odds drops, and then jump in if the horse is over 3-1. That's the way to attack the win pool in terms of looking for fair odds based on your opinions on whether or not a horse has a big shot to win or not. Brian, if you're going to play in the win pool, for me, I still want to stick to 2-1 or more in terms of making a win bet. I know some people will bet a win play less than 2-1 because they say, look, this horse should have been 4-5, 6-5 is an overlay. I get that. But in my handicapping, doing this for more than 30 plus years of my life and doing it professionally for the last 25, I know that I'm on a good day about a 33% handicapper. I can pick the winner 1 out of 3 races when I'm tiled in well. So 1 out of 3 means I'm going to lose 2 out of 3. I've got to get 2-1 odds to break even playing win bets long term in my skill set. So I'm going to go for 2-1 or higher, but Do you see a situation where you would go lower than that, and why would it be?
It happens very infrequently for me, but I'm not completely against the idea of it. I'm not ever going to be chasing a 3 to 5 who's supposed to be 1 to 5. That's not useful to me. But there are some occasions where I've, put down a sizable win wager on a horse at even money who I honestly think should be 2 to 5, and I'm hoping that maybe I can just double my money over the course of, 70 seconds in a sprint race. So I don't necessarily have a hard and fast limit, but obviously it's very few situations for me where it comes to finding horses at those shorter prices attractive enough to play. I'm generally looking like you in that 2 to 1, even preferably 5 to 2 range sort of as the floor there. And one of the things you mentioned that I definitely want to stress here, a little difference between big and small tracks is, the vast majority of money in these pools does come in late, very close to post time. So as Jeremy said, wait as long as you can, especially if you are playing at a small track, because you could be at 4 minutes to post and there might still only be $900 in the win pool. So you have no clue what you're going to get. The smaller the track, the longer you can wait, the better to make that win bet.
And look at the will pays and daily doubles, pick threes, pick fours that end in a particular race. See who the favorites are in those. That's who the favorites in the win pool will end up. So if you're trying to guesstimate where your odds may end up, those will pay pools can be very valuable to you. Brian, that's a good look at win wagering. When we turn the corner to place wagering, I used to be a big win place bettor, but I've kind of gotten out of that a little bit and gone to the back wheel, which is betting all over a particular horse in the exacta. If you're going to do that in lieu of making a place wager where your horse has to finish second, if you're new to the game, place means your horse has to finish first or second. Instead of a place bet, a lot of times what I'm ending up doing now is playing a back wheel with the horse I like second and using all in the top spot. But depending on the field size, you may have to spend $6, $8, $10, $12 to get the all position in there. So if you're playing a small place wager, I can understand why you might still be in the place pool. But let's say you're going to bet 20 to win and 20 to place. I think you're better off, instead of putting the 20 to place, putting $20 into exacta wheels. Get all the combinations you can for $1. Play a few dollars more on the ones that are paying less with the favorites over your horse. And in the long run, you'll do better that way. Catch a couple lobster exactas versus the steady plug of the place pool, because honestly, we don't know what a horse is going to pay to place, Brian. The place payoff is determined by not only what the place horse takes out of the pool, but what the first horse in the wagering takes out of the pool as well. The first horse across the line, the winner also pays the place. So we don't know what we're going to get on these place wagers.
Yeah, and there's nothing worse than, getting a 15 to 1 horse home second and you're excited because you've got 20 to place, except for that the 4 to 5 horse has just gone and won the race, and all of a sudden you're getting, 480 for your 20 to 1 horse who's, making a big dent. So I think that there's definitely a time to be able to back wheel the exact, and I love what you said, though, about not necessarily just saying all with a single horse underneath, but potentially weighting it a little bit more heavily towards some of the more likely combinations. So maybe if the chalkiest exacta comes in, you can have it a handful of times. Maybe if the favorite does win in that case. I very much advocate for that idea as well. But as you mentioned, if you are playing on a smaller bankroll, sometimes you're just stuck taking the place bet.
And as for show betting might be the very first thing you do when you go to the racetrack. It's the simplest bet. It's the least risk in terms of probabilities in all of racing. Your horse only has to finish first, second, or third. But your payoffs, again, determined by who runs first, second, and third. So you have no idea what you're going to get on your show return. And they're probably going to be small. $2 bet. You can hope to maybe get $3 back on those. I'm not big into the show situation. Give us a play where you might get in to bet the show.
Really, one of the only times, probably the only time I bet to show anymore is in situations where we get what is called a bridge jumper. This frequently happens in smaller fields, generally, 6, 7 horses tops. And what will happen is there will be a very heavy favorite, and people around the country will be looking to get a $2.10 show return on that heavy favorite. So what happens is a vast majority of that show pool, better than 90% in a lot of these cases, will get all bet to show on one horse, the heavy favorite. Now remember, in the pari-mutuel wagering system, the winners split the losers' money. So if everybody has bet the heavy favorite to show, my strategy is to bet all of the other horses to show, because if that heavy favorite with all of that show money on it runs out, all of the other people are going to be splitting that big amount of money that was bet on the favorite. We see it all of a sudden. You've got horses paying $18 to win and they're paying $35 to show. It doesn't happen often, but I do think in the long term, betting against quote unquote bridge jumpers, I think it's a good strategy.
The only other show situation where I would throw out there is the show parlay, where you take whatever you win on the first bet, roll it back on the second, roll it back on the third, and keep going down the line. That can be a good way for a newbie to get into the game and have less risk in the game in terms of the probabilities. You've got the most probable return coming up for you, and then you just keep rolling the cash. So maybe you can kind of make a 50% profit, then a 30% profit, and a 30% profit, and keep moving down the line that way. Maybe eventually your initial $5, $10 investment may roll up to 30, 40, 50 bucks that way. A good way to get involved in the game if you're just starting out. But again, there are not many places for a big time bettor to get in the show pool except those looking for rebates. And a lot of the big whale bettors around the country do get involved in the show pools and put down sizable amounts because they're trying to hit a wagering total for the month or the year with their particular provider in order to get a rebate back. So they make the largest wager they can with the lowest amount of risk in some cases just in order to hit a qualifying point towards their rebate. So you'll see some of that in those pools as well as they try to move along and inch out a profit or stay close to even for the year and help those rebates kick in. We hope this gave you a good look at the win, place, and show pools from Brian and I's perspective. Let's go now to the Night School Vault as we go back in a past lesson when Pete Fornatal, the co-author of Betting with an Edge with Mike Maloney, joined us. He talks about win, place, show wagering and some of his thoughts. And after the break, Caton Bredar, the First Lady of Night School, chimes in on tonight's topic.
Racing from Woodbine and Mohawk Park. Thoroughbred and harness action. The wagers are just the beginning. Watch award-winning broadcasts covering both breeds, incredible battles contested over the most unique grass course in North America. Experience the full field with over 130 thoroughbred and 160 live harness days. Get access to free handicapping material and join the ranks of Woodbine and Mohawk Park players from all over the globe. For more information, visit woodbine.com.
Strategize, analyze, select. Join Keeneland Select to bet on racing from around the world on your computer, tablet, or smartphone, anytime, anywhere. Featuring the best rewards in racing, free pass performances, live video, race replays, and more. Plus, Keeneland Select invests a portion of its profits back into the sport. Join Keeneland Select today and earn a $150 sign-up bonus at KeenelandSelect.com. Dedicated to the sport and dedicated to the players.
Some folks like to bet on the horses. Some like to bet on the games. Some folks like to bet on their phone. And some like to bet from their suite. So what's your best bet? All of the above. No matter how you like to bet, Remington Park is your best bet yet. With world-class horse racing, OKC's newest casino, and online suite booking now available. Remington Park, it's your best bet yet.
Hey, what's going on? Mikey here, and I'm going to tell you about an offer from my good friends at ExpressBet. Let's be honest, we know you love playing the races, but you can't always make it to the track. Sometimes life just gets in the way of a good bet. Well, what if I told you about a place where you never miss a bet and you start with house money? You'd say I'm crazy, right? Well, not at ExpressBet. Your first $100 are on them. That's right. Sign up with expressbet.com using promo code XBRadio, bet $100, and they'll deposit $100 back into your account the very next day. Hey, plus you could get an extra $25 if you use Express Fund Direct Deposit. You see what I mean? House money for betting the races. It's that easy. Check it out at expressbet.com to learn more. And don't forget to sign up with promo code XBRadio. You're gonna love it. And that's a Mikey guarantee. Must be 18 years or older and 21 years old in certain states to open an account with ExpressBet and reside in a state where such activity is legal. Void where prohibited. National Gambling Support Line 800-522-4700.
Welcome back to the show. Enjoy this classic night school clip from the vault.
And I would argue sort of the classic debate of what's more important, handicapping or betting. I mean, I feel like in the modern game, in the USA wagering environment, I'm comfortable saying betting is more important. You know, a lot of people with really good opinions who are broke. And everyone I know who's a pro bettor, yeah, they have good opinions too, but they also know how to express those opinions, how to, again, to get back to Steve's analogy, it's almost like a translating process of how do I translate my idea of the race that's in my head into a bet? And being able to connect those dots, and that's something we try to do. We walk through a couple of days and several wagers that Mike has made, some successful, some not. But the idea is exactly that, to connect those dots and show the relationship between the idea of a race and the physical bet. And then to Jeremy's point, to show the risk and reward and what really should be being measured here isn't just, it shouldn't matter what the price is on the board. It should matter what the price is on the board relative to the chance of winning. And when you get those rare but wonderful situations where in your reckoning of the race, that 5-1 shot really is the most likely winner, you should be betting more on that one than the 6-5, not less.
Back to close out tonight's episode with a visit from Caton Bredar. And Caton, earlier this season we were talking, and you mentioned that some of those big wagers, guaranteed pick 4 pools, rainbow pick 6 mandatory payout type pools, that those can be very alluring, but they don't necessarily have to be any more alluring than a regular day. And when we talk about all of the options available to us to bet on horses, sometimes we forget, I think, about how easy it can be to just use the simple wagers, win, place, potentially show betting. Caton, tell our listeners a little bit about the scenarios in which you lean on win, place, and show betting in your personal day-to-day with the horses.
Well, anytime I come up with a horse that I like strongly, and they're going off at anything better than 2-1 or 3-1, you have to consider them as a win bet in addition to whatever else you're doing. If you really, really like the horse, I mean, if they stand out. Now, with today's racing and in many places shorter fields, those opportunities are fewer and fewer, I think, to come up with horses that are going to pay well, that you feel strongly about. But they're still there. I think you find them more in turf racing where there's some bigger fields and where trip comes into play as well. You also will see it more, I think, with maiden races where people tend to fall in love with the buzz horse, or you'll see a certain individual horse, maybe a first-time starter, get way overbet in maiden races because it's supposedly the next best thing. And yes, they do win once in a while, but that creates an opportunity with another horse. Let's say there was another horse that you really felt was capable of winning in those races, or that you had been looking at quite closely. You'll sometimes see if they're not from a big barn, if they're not or prominent barn, if they're not with a top-name jockey or familiar jockey at the circuit, if they're, not easily into a certain category that warrants a lot of buzz and a lot of excitement, or if they don't get bet early on the board. A lot of times those prices will stay pretty solid in the middle, and they're opportunities for win bets. And you have to win. If you've done the work and done the handicapping and come up with a horse that is at good odds that you like as a win candidate, then you got to bet them to win. That's my motto anyway. I also think, even in the maiden races, especially, I will bet a horse to place. I mean, if they're good odds, especially if I'm uncertain about several different horses, but there's one I like a lot and he's big price, well, I'll bet him to win, but I'll also bet him to place because, he could run a huge race, just get beat, and still pay very generously. So sometimes you can make even more by betting to place in those types of opportunities. Again, I think they're fewer and farther between just because of field size lately, but most maiden races, you do get some good opportunities as far as odds if you watch long enough, and especially in turf racing. So I would say those are, and I haven't bet to show very often, other than I do feel like when you bring new people to the track, it's a fun way to try to get a show parlay going where you try to select a horse and then wager back whatever you've won along the way through a sequence of races and see how far you can go with it. I think can be a very fun way to familiarize people to the sport and to teach people a little bit about handicapping in general without a high risk and still some reward before it's all done. So I would say those are the only times that I do. And I also will jump in occasionally if we see a show jumper or a bridge jumper. If it's, I think there's a possibility that the horse that they're jumping on is vulnerable, or there's some way that horse might get beat, then it is fun to jump in and bet the show on everybody in the field. So, and see if you can, but to me, it's a little counterintuitive because it's almost like rooting for something to happen to the favorite or, rooting for a horse to get beat that is usually a pretty prominent horse. So I just, that's not, it's kind of a tough way to go, but every once in a while, if you didn't think that horse warranted that kind of favoritism going into it, and you see the person is plunged and made that big, big show bet, then, I might try to take a shot and bet on everybody else.
And Caton also pointing out that maybe with field sizes making some of these attractive win bets a little tougher to find, maybe maiden race is a good place to get some of those wagers along with turf racing. This is going to put a bow on our win betting episode here of Season 9 of Night School. We'll be back next week. We'll be talking about pace handicapping. We'll look forward to talking with you then. Good night.
On FAQ 60, headwinds and tailwinds. While you rarely hear discussion of wind in thoroughbred or harness handicapping, it's a blustery topic in the American quarter horse world. Simply put, headwinds or tailwinds can have a major impact on the clock and the outcome of a quarter horse race. Make adjustments to emphasize horses with strong finishing kicks when racing into a headwind, while giving superior gate breakers who may lack real stamina a bigger chance when pushed along by a tailwind. Also utilize wind direction and speed when handicapping a horse's next race. You may want to move up or down a previous performance you see in the program based on your knowledge of that past race's wind conditions. Speed figures also help you adjust your perception of time when dealing with winds. This FAQ 60 is brought to you by AQHA Racing and Horse Player Now.
Enjoyed tonight's episode? Check out hundreds of past archives at horseplayer.now.